I was out on a camping trail in early spring with my dog, Simba. Simba was a very young blue heeler, so medium-sized and very active. I was still training him on our hikes and everything, so I always chose very easy to navigate, but far out, non-active trails. Sometimes they wouldn't even have a single review on any of the common trail apps or websites. But it was a lot easier to train Simba when nobody else was around. This camping spot we had hiked to was about 1 hour into the forest and seemed very unused. It was, by far, the most isolated feeling area that we'd been to. Simba did very well on the trail, and for the first few hours that we spent hanging around the camp, he had a ton of energy still. But I was tired. So, once the sun went down, I got in the tent and tried to sleep. Simba, of course, was inside the tent with me. But after about 4 hours past sunset, he started to get very restless. Not like he just wasn't tired, but like he was anxious. I ended up having to unzip the tent and let him out, hoping maybe he just had to go use the bathroom. But when I stepped out with him, he didn't do anything. Simba kind of just circled around the camp, stopping every few seconds, as if he was guarding the area. I'd never seen him do that before. I grabbed my flashlight and used it to look around, but there was nothing out there. I stayed out there with him for 40 minutes before bringing him back in. He really didn't want to, but he did eventually listen to me and get into the tent. The rest of that night was awful. Simba remained restless and awake, anxiously squirming in the tent all night. In the morning, I didn't even want to get up because of how tired I was. When we did leave the tent, Simba went right back to circling the campsite again. And while he did, I noticed some strange marks in the dirt behind the tent. It looked like maybe footprints, but hard to tell for sure. And if it was, then I couldn't be sure whether or not they were mine. When I started looking more, I saw that they were all around the campsite. Not a single one of the marks was a defined footprint, though. It looked more like if you dragged your feet through the dirt so that it didn't make an imprint. I felt like if it wasn't from me, then I would have noticed if they were there while I was setting up the camp yesterday. But I don't know. I sat down and made breakfast, watching the sun come up over the trees and warm up the forest before taking Simba out for a morning walk. There were no paths, so we just walked between the trees in a random direction. A couple minutes in, Simba caught a scent. He was really drawn by it, moving fast and clearly following something. He went on for a minute or two before stopping. He started sniffing around in the same area, going back and forth near the base of a tree, like he'd lost the scent all of a sudden. After a minute, and figuring it was just another animal, I called Simba back over, and we started to head back to the campsite. That day, after getting back, everything felt different. The woods were eerily quiet, and I felt uneasy, like I was being watched. I was constantly looking over my shoulders and scanning the forest, looking between all the trees for any reason that could explain why I felt this way. Simba seemed very on guard too, not wanting to rest at all. He'd been like that for almost a full 23 hours by this point, and as it got later and the sun started going down, I could tell Simba was really exhausted. I made a campfire and tried to get Simba to lay down in the tent to get some rest so he didn't overwork himself. I could tell he was still fighting to keep his eyes open though. I sat by the fire, poking it and listening to the silence that filled the forest. The hours passed, slowly. It was around 10:15 p.m. when suddenly, Simba lifted his head like he'd heard something. And just when I looked over at him, a stick landed right in the campsite. I didn't see where it came from because I was looking at Simba. I looked up, but none of the trees really hung over the campsite enough for it to have just fallen, confused, and fighting back the uneasy feelings. I stood up and picked up the stick, then looked around the forest. There wasn't anything out there. It was pitch black and still, completely silent. And then another stick landed right in front of me, almost bouncing into the campfire. Someone had definitely thrown it. My heart started racing. Simba came out of the tent, still tired, but as soon as he stepped out, he was dead focused on something in the dark, directly in front of me. I genuinely did not know what to do. "Hello? Who's out there?" I dug my flip knife out of my pocket and had it ready in my hand. There was probably 25 seconds of nothing, where the fear was just building up in me before Simba started going crazy, barking, growling, and jumping back and forth aggressively. I looked down at him, and Simba was looking up. I followed his gaze to the tree right outside of our campsite, and about halfway up, there was a person looking down at us. He looked tall, but thin, and was being completely still, like he didn't think we could see him. I took a few slow steps back, picking up my backpack and grabbing Simba by the collar, then continued to back up until reaching the trail. The figure stayed motionless, sitting in the tree for as long as I could see him. But when we got to the trail, I heard a thump. It sounded like him landing on the ground. Then, there was a quick succession of leaves crunching, running up to the campfire. I saw him stop and stand right there in the light, watching us. I turned and started sprinting down the trail. Simba stayed right by my side. We eventually made it back to the trailhead and got away. That had to be the creepiest thing I'd ever experienced, and I honestly don't have a clue what that person was doing out there or trying to do. The way he acted almost wasn't even human, like he was a feral animal, which just made it that much more disturbing. I think if I hadn't brought Simba with me, that person would have done a lot worse than just stalking my campsite. And I probably wouldn't have made it out of that forest by the end of it.